Well, hello model car fans. Welcome to the Muscle Car Modeler. My name is Revell, and this week I'm going to showcase my just completed 87 Buick Grand National here. And this is the Revell Monogram kit, 1/24 scale. But it came out beautifully. I'm really happy with the way this has come out. And you know, for what I was going to be a simple build, you know, it's mostly black and gray, not a whole lot to it, but turned out great. Really happy with it. But on the Grand National, a lot of interesting things reading and researching this car. If you're not familiar with them, and a lot of the features and quirks and some of the more interesting details and aspects of the car. The very first year of them was actually 82 Grand National, and they weren't all black. So I'm gonna put up a picture of one of them so you can see where the Grand National name started in 82, and it was in response to 1981 the Buick Regals were winning NASCAR or Winston Cup, and they were tearing it up, and they won it. So Buick, to celebrate, they came out with a limited edition Buick Regal called the Grand National, and it was gray and black, and they added a spoiler, T-tops, and a few other things. But what was interesting is in most of the literature and everything, it did not come with a turbo V6. 4.1 liter V6 and making 125 horsepower, so big engine there. They were planning to make 100, but 215 were made, so they're very rare. They're really not that collectible though, as far as the first year. And also something happened with it where I was reading a little bit about Buick was getting sued for the Grand National name over that car. So 215 were made, and most of them had the 4.1 liter V6. What is interesting though is some of them have turned up and have factory documentation that they did have the 3.8 turbo in them. Depending on what you read, the latest one I read in Hemmings, they have a car on their site that actually has the 3.8, and they claim that 20 were made, and this one has the documentation to prove it. I thought that was really cool. Buick was being sued for over the Grand National name. Couldn't find much on that actual lawsuit on that. It was also a very rare car. Like I said, 215 were made, but there were no Buick Grand Nationals for 83. So I found that interesting, and I wonder if that has a result to do with the lawsuits or whatnot. But for 84, they did come out with the Grand National again, and that was the first year of the all-black paint scheme, and all of them were the 3.8 turboed. But what's interesting with those, they only made about 2,000 of them, and it was 200 horsepower. And then 85, they made another 2,100 were produced of the Grand National, the all-black Grand Nationals. Now keep in mind, Buick was also making the T-Type at this time, so it was virtually the same car, but you can get it in different interior colors and different options. But if you wanted the Grand National name, it was black for 84, 85. And then for 86, they increased it by adding the intercooler, which this one has the emblem on the fender that says that. Intercool is right there on the bottom side. I'll get more into that in a minute. But in 86, they put the intercooler on it, and it was making 235 horsepower. In 87 being the pinnacle year. Oh, in 86 they produced, what does my notes say? 5,512 were produced of the Grand Nationals. So definitely a bigger selling year. They were making a lot more of them. But 87 was the last year for the rear-wheel drive G-body Buick Regal, which was selling like crazy. And so 87 was the last year of the Grand National, and they knew it, the rear-wheel drive platform. It was going to be replaced by the front-wheel drive platform. So for 87, they did a few things to the computer and whatnot, so it was producing 245 horsepower. And by this time, it was actually faster than the Corvette, and making a little bit more horsepower than the Corvette, even though the Corvette had a V8 in it. It's kind of interesting reading about all of that. 87, which is why a lot of people think 87 is the only year for the Grand National, they produced 20,000 of them. They were making them as fast as they could. So 2,193 were produced with 245 horsepower and 355 foot-pounds of torque. Kind of amazing. And then to top it off, they wanted a swan song. They came out with the cream of the crop, the GNX, and 547 of those were built. I'm not going to get too much into the GNX features because I am building one of those. I'm going to build one of those. So I'll go over the differences and uniqueness of the GNX. So I'm going to stick with just the Grand National on this particular video here. And then the 87, which is what I built here. Although I really couldn't find any differences between an 86 and an 87 other than, 5,000 versus 20,000 were produced. So there's 4 times as many 87s out there. And when you see them, they're out there, but they're mostly 87s that you see for sale. And then not as many 85 or 84s. So it's kind of interesting that 84, 85, and 86, when you add up the total production, there were more 87s produced than any of the others, including the 82. And as an interesting side note, and one that I stumbled upon that I thought was interesting, but I haven't read much more on it, there was one other Grand National produced in 1986. Get this, they had the Buick LeSabre Grand National, and it was also an all-black car, and it had the 3.8 liter engine in it, front-wheel drive, but no turbo. I forgot what the horsepower was. It was like 150, 175, and they're so rare that 117 were produced. I thought that's kind of a footnote in the Grand National name. So if you're a Grand National fan, you may or may not know about that one. I was floored when I ran into that fact. But now getting on to my build, which is virtually box stock. I mean, I built it from an earlier issue. The earlier issue, as I mentioned, had the decal right here that actually says Grand National Intercooled. But the later kit does not have the intercooled sticker. It has the same Grand National sticker all the way around. So I spliced the old decal and the new decal because my old decal was having trouble getting it to stick. It was just a really old glue and it wasn't sticking. And then I got this one. This is the one I had where the firewall was cut out, so I repaired the firewall. And then the axle was modified, the rear suspension, which I had a small issue with it because of that. My axle isn't quite centered, but it wasn't enough to bother me to fix it. So that's where it's at right here. And then I did polish the paint, so I'm really happy with how the Tamiya polish has polished out the paint on this thing. And then I semi-gloss blacked or flat blacked the trim to make it stand out more, like the real car. The spoiler, the bumper guards, the headlight bezels are flat blacked. Trim around all the windows, and then the interior. The interior came out beautifully. You can see the decal on those headrests. I think my camera's having trouble picking it up because everything's so black. But she polished out beautifully, and I'm really happy with the way she came out. But dust is a big issue, as you can see. I keep cleaning it off, but the more I touch it, the more I smear the stuff around. And then engine came out really, really nice. So I'm really happy with the way that came out. And I had a small issue. The radiator is supposed to go under this, but for some reason it wouldn't. And if I pushed it under and was trying to glue it, the front end was pushed up high. So I was trying to figure out what's going on there. So I ended up gluing the radiator where it is right now, and I had to shorten the radiator hose going into it. So on my other build, I'm going to see what's going on there. I followed the directions on exactly where to glue it, but I'm not so sure I interpreted that right. But and then I used all of the decals from the later kit, so it has more decals as far as on the engine, and then there's one on the compressor there if the camera will pick that up. And then flat white the bottles, and then the brake master cylinder, the reservoir. But I'm really pleased with how this one came out, and so much so that I decided I would start working on the GNX as well, even though they're pretty much straight out of the box builds. A little tweaking, a little sanding and polishing here, and then I had a bugger in the clear right here, which you can't see now. It polished out really, really nice. But there's how that came out. But really, really pleased with this one, even though it was kind of a quick build. And that's going to go right in my display case. But I figured it was time to show you guys and check it out. Beautiful car, beautiful build, and I'm really happy with the way it came out. So kind of excited to get going on the GNX, so I kind of started that one. We'll feature more on that one in future episodes, or I'll just build it and show you the end result, because there's not a whole lot of differences, but a couple little things I'm tweaking on that one. But this one pretty much right out of the box. So thank you for watching, and thank you for subscribing and your comments, and I appreciate all of them and try to respond to all of them. And you guys, you have a wonderful Saturday, and I will see you next Saturday. Thank you.